Solving two-step equations. You have two steps. The first step is to combine like terms if possible. You're not always going to have terms that you can combine. I gave you an example down here that you do, just so you see what that step looks like. When we come across one where you don't have to do step one, I'll let you know. Step two is you complete the order of operations, but you do it backwards. And we'll talk about why in just a second. So this example down here, combining like terms for step one. If I have 2x and then a plus 3x, can I combine those? Yeah, those are considered like terms. Okay, we did a lot with this when we were combining, when we were doing like 2x squared plus 4y minus 6x squared. Okay, these are considered like terms because they have the same variable with the same exponent on the end. Okay, like terms can also be whole numbers, so negative 12 plus 3. Those are considered like terms. You can combine those right at the beginning. Okay, so anything that you can combine right at the beginning, you need to do that first. So what's 2x plus 3x?
5x.
5x. So we're going to write 5x. We still have minus 12, and we still have equals 3. Is everybody okay with that step? Everybody's writing it down with me?
Yep.
From here, we don't have anything else that we can combine on the same side of the equal sign, so we're going to complete order of operations backwards. And I'm going to have you guys get into a habit first of what would you do if we were to plug in a number for x. So let's talk about what we would do if we were to actually evaluate this and solve this. So if I were to plug in on this side, if I were to plug in x equals 3, okay, so let's just pretend, and you don't have to write this, let's pretend I plugged in a 3. Following regular order of operations, what are we going to do first? We're going to do multiplication first. So I'm just going to write that down over here. We're going to multiply the 5 times the 3 first. Everybody agrees with that? And then what are we going to do next? We're going to subtract it. So, if you get in the habit of writing this down, step 2 is pretty easy. You start at the bottom and you do this backwards. So if I were to solve this, this is considered two-step equation because I have 2 steps to solve this. I need to get rid of the subtraction first, and then I can get rid of the multiplication. But you still have to do the opposite. If I want to get rid of minus 12, what am I going to do? What's the opposite? You're going to add 12. You still have to do the opposite to get rid of it. We want to cancel this out. Okay? If we subtract 12, we're still going to have a negative 24 in there. That's not going to help us. But if we add 12, what's a negative 12 plus 12? 0. That cancels out. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So this is going to cancel out, and we're left with 5x equals 15. So now we're just down to a one-step equation. How do I get rid of the multiplication? You divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 5. 5 over 5 cancels out. That becomes 1. But 1 times x is just x. So those cancel out. And then what's 15 divided by 5? 3. So this one is x equals 3. You can always check your work. Well, I gave you the answer to this one right off the bat, didn't I?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that. So if I were to take x and plug it back in, what's 5 times 3? 15 minus 12, and it's 3. If you get the same number equals the same number, whether it's a fraction, a decimal, a whole number, a negative number, as long as they equal each other, you're correct. If you get something like 4 equals 3, then you did not get the right answer. You need to go back and try it again. Okay? So get in the habit of checking your work. Questions on this first one? Okay, and let's do a couple more together. Go ahead and take a second and write this first one down. So it says r over 10 plus 4 equals 5. R over 10 plus 4 equals 5. So the first thing that we're going to do is if we were to actually evaluate the expression on this side, Okay, I want to figure out what we're going to do for order of operations. So can we combine anything over here? No. So we don't have to do step 1 in this case. We don't have any like terms that we can combine. So if I were to plug in a value for r and actually work this problem out, what operation am I going to do first? If I plug in a 20 up here, what am I going to do first? I'm going to divide first because it's over 10. So following order of operations, I would divide first, and then what would I do next? And then I would add. Is everybody okay with that for order of operations? So now to solve this, we have to do the opposite. We have to work backwards, but we have to do the inverse. So to get rid of the adding part, what am I going to do? I'm going to subtract it. So we're going to subtract 4. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we have a positive 4 and a negative 4. That's going to cancel out and become 0. So those are gone. And we're left with r over 10 equals 1. Okay? So now we have division left. What's the inverse of division? Multiplication. So we're going to multiply both sides by 10. Because 10 over 10 cancels out. Becomes 1. 1 times r is r. 1 times 10 on this side is 10. Okay? So let's plug it back in. If I take r and I plug it in here, following my original order of operations, what's 10 divided by 10? 1. What's 1 plus 4? 5. So we are left with 5 equals 5. So did we get the right answer? Yes. Questions on that one? Okay, let's do the next one together. Go ahead and write this one down. It says n over 2 plus 5 equals 3. N over 2 plus 5 equals 3. And let's do the same thing. If I were to plug in a value for n, following order of operations, what would we do first? We would divide first. After we divide, what would we do? Then we would add, and that's all we have. So now we're going to work backwards. So starting with adding, how do we get rid of adding? We subtract. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. A positive 5 and a negative 5 cancel out. That becomes 0. So this leaves us with n over 2 equals, what's 3 minus 5? Negative 2. Good. So now all we have left is division. We need to get rid of that. How do we get rid of division? We multiply. So we're going to multiply both sides by a positive 2. These cancel out. And we're left with n equals, what's a negative times positive? Negative. And then 2 times 2 is 4. So let's take this and plug it back in. What's a negative 4 divided by 2? Negative 2, good. What's a negative 2 plus 5?
3.
It's a positive 3. So we're left with 3 equals 3. So we did great. Are we good on that one? Okay, let's do another one. Go ahead and write this one down here. It says 3p minus 2 equals negative 29. 3p minus 2 equals negative 29. So if I were to plug in a value for p, what operation would we do first following our order of operations? We would do our multiplication first. After we did multiplication, what would we do? What does this hit? We would subtract. So we need to do this backwards and the opposite. So how do we get rid of subtraction? We're going to add. So to get rid of this minus 2, we're going to add 2 to both sides. So we have a negative 2 and a positive 2. Those cancel out. We're left with 3p equals, what's a negative 29 plus 2?
Negative 27.
Negative 27, good. Negative 27. So we have multiplication left, and how do you get rid of multiplication? We divide. So you're going to divide both sides by 3. Those cancel. You're left with P equals, what's a negative divided by a positive? A negative, and what's 27 divided by 3?
9.
9. So let's take this and plug it back in. What is a positive 3 times a negative 9? Negative 27. What's negative 27 minus 2? Negative 29. So we're good. Let's do one more together, and then I have 4 you guys can work on your own. So if I have 1 minus r equals a negative 5. Okay? And now this one, since you guys know how to deal with negative numbers, this looks like a one-step equation, but it's actually not. If I were to put a 1 right here, okay, this is actually 1 and then minus, there's a 1 times r in here. So it's still a two-step equation because we're still going to have to get rid of this negative at the end. So let's just put an imaginary 1 in there. And if we were to plug in something for r, what would we do first? There's a 1 in front of it. We would actually, what is happening right here, we're actually multiplying a negative 1 times r. So multiply is going to happen first. Oops, and then, now hang on a second. This is a positive 1 right here. How would we get rid of this positive 1? Okay, so but this is a plus 1 right here. So we're going to call this addition because we're going to add the 1 at the end. Okay? And so to do this backwards, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. A positive 1 minus 1 gives us the 0, but we still have a negative 1 times r. And then what's a negative 5 minus 1?
5. Negative 6.
Negative 6. Signs are the same, so we add them and keep the sign. So now we have multiplication going on. To get rid of that negative, you need to divide by a negative 1. So we're going to divide both sides by a negative 1. A negative 1 and a negative 1 cancels. And we're left with r equals, what's negative divided by negative? Positive. So this becomes a positive 6. Okay? So let's plug this back in. And since you guys know how to do integers, what's 1 minus 6? Negative 5. Are we okay with that one?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and have you guys work on these on your own.
Yeah.